Hallå, välkommen till Jesusfolket. Shane Claiborne har varit en väldigt stor inspirationskälla för mig och många andra kristna i min ålder. Jag skulle tro att hans bok Den oemotståndliga revolutionen är en av de absolut mest vällästa böckerna bland unga frikyrkliga i Sverige. Den var otroligt inflytelserik för 10 år sedan, och även hans bok Jesus for President var inflytelserik. Det här var böcker som handlar om kristen aktivism, om icke-våld, om fattigdomsbekämpning, om kommunitetsliv och egendomsgemenskap, om att rädda miljön och så vidare. Och hur man motiverade utifrån Bibeln, vilket är förfärligt enkelt. Det Shane Claiborne representerar är en evangelikal kristendom som tar Bibeln seriöst, och just därför engagerar vi oss för fred och rättvisa. Jag hade privilegiet att intervjua honom för några veckor sedan. Det är så att nu till helgen, 6 och 7 april, så kommer Shane tillsammans med några kompisar arrangera väckelsemöten utanför Liberty University i Lynchburg i Virginia i USA, på planeten jorden. Och det här universitetet, det är världens största evangelikala universitet. Och deras rektor är en ivrig Trump-supporter. Han har bjudit in Trump att prata där. Och det här har skapat förstås konflikter och lite dålig magkänsla hos många av studenterna. Det var några som sa till Shane: vi vill vara kända för att ära Jesus och inte ära Trump. Så de här väckelsemötena kommer handla om där Jesus och rättvisa, och peka på att evangelikal kristendom blundar inte för förtryck och blundar inte för problemen med krig och orättvisor, utan främjar fred och rättvisa. Självklart budskap, men som är rätt kontroversiellt i USA. Så jag intervjuade Shane om det här, och jag passade också på att fråga vad han tycker om mirakler. Väckelse är ju något väldigt starkt och värdefullt i den karismatiska traditionen, och jag fann till min glädje, och det hade jag misstänkt länge, att han är brinnande karismatiker. Han tror att Gud kan göra mirakler och att de miraklerna kan användas för att utbreda fred och rättvisa. Och vi pratar även om kommunitetsliv och om vad man ska tänka på när man startar en kommunitet. Så det här är en jättespännande intervju. Tyvärr så kom den första biten inte med. Jag hade lite tekniska problem med att spela in det här, och överlag så är ljudkvaliteten ganska dålig. Så jag ber om ursäkt för det, men jag hoppas att ni kan ha överseende om det, för det är inte varje dag en svensk får intervjua Shane Claiborne. Jag hoppas att det ska funka. Så första biten när vi pratar om själva väckelsemötena kom tyvärr inte med, men nu har ni fått en beskrivning av det, och ni kan läsa en artikel som jag skrev för dagen utifrån intervjun, där jag går in lite mer i detalj på vad de här väckelsemötena innebär. Så gå in på dagen.se och sök på Shane Claiborne eller mig, så hittar ni den artikeln, hur han vill bekämpa Trump med väckelsemöten. Jag lyckades faktiskt också bjuda in Shane. När jag jobbade på IFK, jag slutade nu 15 mars, så gick jag in i frizonsrum, och de satt där och funderade på så här, hur kan vi locka mer folk till frizon? Och jag sa: bjud in Shane Claiborne. Och de bara: ja, okej, ja, det är en bra idé. Och jag bara: ja, men seriöst, jag kan försöka. Och så gjorde jag det, och så lyckades jag. Så han kommer till frizon i augusti. Det blir jätteroligt. Det ska bli fantastiskt kul att få snacka lite mer med honom. Så snart ska jag släppa fram intervjun. Jag vill bara säga en sak till, och det är att jag precis satt igång en Kickstarter, en insamlingskampanj för att finansiera en bok som jag vill skriva. Det är en bok om dokumenterade mirakler. När jag har pratat både med ateister och kristna och hävdat att det finns massa exempel på vetenskapligt oförklarliga tillfrisknande efter bön, så har folk sagt: vad har du för källa för det? Och min källa har varit typ 30 olika källor, så här, olika böcker och sådär, där jag har snappat upp det här. Men det frustrerar mig lite grann att jag inte kan peka på liksom en enda bok som pekar på: nej, men här finns faktiskt bevis för att Gud är levande och verksam idag. Och så slår det mig, jag kan ju försöka skriva den boken själv. Bokskrivande kräver tid, och för att jag ska kunna avsätta den tiden så måste jag göra det som ett jobb. Så av den anledningen så har jag en insamling, och om ni tror att en sån här bok behövs och skulle vilja läsa den, så uppskattar jag verkligen om ni vill stödja den insamlingen. Bara en liten gåva räcker, det skulle betyda jättemycket för mig. Och i utbyte kan ni få lite godis, så att säga. Så om man ger 300 spänn så får man naturligtvis boken, om man ger 500 spänn så får man sitt namn i boken och så vidare. Det finns andra nivåer också där man får lite olika grejer. Så om ni är intresserade av att läsa mer om det här, se den roliga videon jag gjort om det här och stödja insamlingen, så kan ni gå in på helapingsten.com/mirakler. Så, det var allt jag tänkte säga. Nu kommer äntligen intervjun med min idol, Shane Claiborne.
Jesus for president, one of the postures that we suggested is a good one for Christians is damage control when we vote. That we're thinking like, I'm going to vote for the political candidate that's going to do the least amount of damage in the world, you know. So kind of harnessing the principalities and powers that are out there. I mean, I think that's kind of how I thought of this last election, you know. Now there are things that we've never ruled out, the fact that, like, you know, God changes hearts, but God I think also expects us to change laws, you know, that are stifling the flourishing of human people. You probably are familiar. I've been doing a whole lot of work around the death penalty, and around gun violence, because I think those are two things that the tide is changing on, and we can see some substantial changes made. You know, I've never really encouraged people to disengage politically, but more to engage appropriately without, like, throwing our full weight in of this is the hope of the world kind of thing. You know, we're not looking for a new Messiah. So I'm really hopeful. I mean, I think on things like the death penalty, you know, one vote can change history, and also determine who lives and dies, especially as you look at our Supreme Court that's almost, you know, equally divided. There's also, you know, with gun violence, I think we're going to do a big action next week that's around banning assault rifles. So, you know, military style weapons on our streets, they don't belong there. And so those things, I mean, as much as we pray and we need to pray, I think we also have to get off our knees and organize sometimes too.
Yeah. And you obviously have been campaigning for peace and justice issues within the evangelical realm for over a decade. Were you surprised that 80% of white evangelicals supported Trump? Or were you sort of expecting that this is where white evangelicalism is right now?
Yeah, I think I was surprised by I mean, 81% is really high. You know, it wouldn't have surprised me to have a majority. But the thing that you said that's so important is what we're talking about are white evangelicals. And, you know, I wrote a piece in the New York Times with Tony, and there's other pieces that we've done. I wrote this chapter of a book called Still Evangelical, kind of like dissecting that a little bit, because what's so important is as you include other evangelicals than just white evangelicals, that number drops significantly, even some would suggest into a minority of the population, because part of what's happened too is that there's folks that don't want to identify as evangelical because of that. The kind of identity theft or colonizing of evangelicalism that's happened. So there's a lot of folks that are evangelical that they don't want to use the word, you know. So it gets a little dicey. But what I think that showed us very clearly is that there's a generational gap too, overwhelmingly, of young folks and older white evangelicals that are kind of the old guard, you know, the James Dobson, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, almost exclusively older white men that are out there. And you even see that in the lineage of Billy Graham, who just passed, and how his son has postured himself, Franklin Graham, when it comes to politics, I think is really heartbreaking, even to their own family. You know, Jerusha, who's going to be with us in Lynchburg, is the granddaughter of Billy Graham. So, yeah, I think we see this real kind of discrepancy there But I'm encouraged because as you look at young people, they're overwhelmingly young people of faith. And Christian young people, they are against the death penalty. They're concerned about gun violence. They care about immigration, and it's because of their faith. So I think that this stuff's really changing. You can see like the Parkland students down in Florida that are, after this mass shooting that are rising up around our country. I mean, some of the biggest marches we expect on March 24th around gun violence. So I think it's exciting. Years ago, there was an article written that said, it was in the Atlantic, and it said, "How will this generation change Washington when they hate it so much?" So I've been to schools that they said they're political science majors and folks that might go into politics has like just absolutely dropped. And I was talking to him, I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, it's because books like Jesus for President," he was half joking, but I would say adamantly these days that to be Christian doesn't mean that we disengage from politics, but that I see policies as one more extension of loving my neighbor as myself means caring about policies that affect them. So, loving my neighbor as myself can be giving out a meal or, inviting someone into my home, but it can also be influencing immigration policies that are causing so many of our young brothers and sisters right now, especially the dreamers, the DACA recipients, to live in such fear for the uncertainty of what their future holds.
Yeah. And again, I found it really interesting that you connect this campaigning for social justice with revival. And for me, as a charismatic, obviously I connect revival not only to conversion and evangelism, but also to the power of signs and wonders. And a part of the irresistible revolution that I love to quote to people and share is the part where you share a testimony from a friend of yours who was a missionary and they had run out of medical supplies and they only had Pepto-Bismol. And so they experienced this weird miracle, basically. I don't remember the details of that. But basically what I want to ask you is, do you think it's possible that God can help us in our social justice campaigning by doing these impossible miracles?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. I still have a deep charismatic and Pentecostal DNA in me, And one of the things I love is when these worlds come together, So I think of prayer and action kind of like blades of scissors, They kind of have to go together, and they don't work very well when you separate and you just have people that pray all the time and people that are, activists all the time. I think we need to really integrate those in our own person. But there's such beautiful movements, especially over there in Europe. The 24/7 prayer movement, the charismatic movement, the new forms and the different iterations of church out there. But here we've got some of that too, especially historically. You look at folks that were a part of some of the great revivals, and they were also talking about social justice. It changed the way they thought about possessions. Even John Wesley. I was raised Methodist, and he even though some of the Methodist churches lost a little of that fire in some places, like it was originally a very charismatic movement, and Wesley said, if I find money in my hands, I get rid of it as quick as I can before it corrupts my heart. He was a very wild social justice guy, so there are groups here in the States too of the Pentecostal charismatic peace fellowship. Groups that are committed to nonviolence and social justice. So I absolutely love that. And I'm a huge believer in miracles. I often, refer to the story of the fish and loaves miracle that Jesus does as a conspiracy between us and God, that we're working together because, the disciples, the story starts by the disciples coming to Jesus and saying, "Hey, you need to do something. There's a lot of hungry people. They need to be fed." And Jesus says, "You do something, feed them." they get the fish and loaves from this little kid. They divide it up, and there's just tons of food left over. I think it was both a miracle and the faithfulness of the disciples, the attentiveness of the disciples to notice that people are hungry. All of that kind of worked together. And in the end, I love that this little kid got to be a part of the miracle by sharing his lunch. The disciples got to be a part of the miracle. So, yeah, I think that one of the beautiful things is that God refuses to change the world without us. Like, God really wants us to be a part of this. And you look at a lot of the great movements of Wilberforce and others, and these movements that ended slavery and that transformed the world. A lot of them were this kind of conspiracy where humans, we're using our gifts and our attentiveness to the needs of the world and connecting our gifts to the world. But also, there's some amazing miracles that have happened. Even just 3 days ago, we were talking about Iraq. I was with a group of people that I was in Iraq with 2 different times, and we saw some pretty stunning, miraculous things, I would say, and there's still those stories coming out of Iraq. In fact, I heard one of them this week. So yeah, I believe that, and I believe that like I think I wrote in one of in that first book or one of my books that often those miracles happen when we put ourselves in a place where we need them. Like we live so much of our lives like where we don't really need much miraculous provision. We kind of go to the doctor when we get sick. We go to the store when we get hungry, and we aren't really in a place where our lives, we live in a manner that requires miracles. So I think we need to do that more. And I love it when these movements come together. I did an event in the UK with Bill Johnson, which I thought was really wonderful. Bill Johnson, he's been, a writer in the Bethel Church and done a lot of signs and wonders kind of work over here. I was devastated when he supported Donald Trump. But
yeah, me too.
Kept praying for the, Lord help that. Yeah, but anyway, So yeah.
So, do you think there's something that we can learn from Donald Trump?
Well, I think that we can learn from what's happening right now in America. I heard someone say really well, Donald Trump isn't changing America, but he's revealing America. And so all of this dirty residue of racism and white supremacy has been here. And certainly what we can learn from is how to surface that and how to do the hard work that we need to do to heal the wounds of our history. It's kind of like we swept it under a rug and it wasn't going anywhere. So we now, the rug's up. Let's do something about this that might permanently change our country. So I don't want to give Donald Trump much credit for that.
Yeah.
I think in some ways he just held a mirror up to our country, so we were forced to look at ourselves. But I do think that this is an incredibly significant moment in the history of the United States that where we are going to see some major shifts, where people are rising up like we haven't seen. Even, in the civil rights movement, some of the numbers of folks that are rising up now are even surpassing those numbers. Wow. I think that these are all building on one another. We've got unique tools that we didn't have then. We've got unique challenges too. But anyway, I think it's Donald Trump. I think also is the it's been said he's kind of the part of the iceberg that you can see, but underneath the water there's a whole lot more to the iceberg. And I think that's true too. That these are symptoms of a bigger disease, and Donald Trump's going to be, here and gone probably sooner than 4 years.
Yeah.
But this residue of racism and slavery is still with us. So I think we've got to address that and not trivialize this by just reducing it to Donald Trump. I think what we see in white evangelicalism right now, and why we're doing the Lynchburg revival, so many other things, is that there's something that goes much deeper. And part of that is that we've fused together Christianity and American nationalism, in a way that these become almost indistinguishable from each other. So when you have, Robert Jeffress at First Baptist Church in Dallas, they're singing "Make America Great Again" as if it was a hymn in worship. The American flag's bigger than the cross. And what happens is you begin to see the discrepancy between the values of America and the values inherent in the gospel. When you make idols out of fame and wealth and power, Donald Trump is the natural result. When we forget the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor, blessed are the merciful, the meek." I mean, those are the antithesis of the things that we've come to idolize in America. We don't celebrate meekness or the poor or the merciful or the peacemakers. I mean, that would be scandalous, So I think that's where we've got to focus on Jesus again. And a lot of white evangelicalism has lost their grounding in Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. So we got to go back there and, say, what if Jesus really meant the stuff he said? And I think we got to preach that, and we got to try to live that.
Yeah.
We've got to hold that in contrast, to see how different these gospels are, because the gospel of Trump is very different from the gospel of Jesus. Yeah. And the lifestyle of Trump is very different from the lifestyle of the gospel. And so something happens when we mix those up. Yeah. We get confused.
Your intentional community, The Simple Way, has inspired many. You're commonly described as being part of the new monastic movement. Where I'm sitting right now, we have a small community here in Uppsala, Sweden.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah, we're just 3 people so far, but we're building on it. Do you think that there's a possibility for a community revival as well, and that this Jesus and Justice movement that we want to be a part of can be housed in intentional communities inspired by the Book of Acts, and what are the prospects for the future, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what's happening in a lot of ways is that folks around the world, really, not just in the U.S., of course, but all over the world are waking up to the fact that we are not meant to be alone in the world. And part of the good news is that we're not alone. You look at the whole biblical story, and it's the story of community, of God forming community, of Jesus living with his community, and the first human, when God makes us out of the dirt, it's not pronounced real good until they're together, helping each other. This God is community, Father, Son, Spirit. We see this reflection of community. So we're made in that image, and as Jesus says to the disciples, "Where 2 or 3 of you gather in my name, I'm with you." So that's everywhere, and it's in us, that we're made to love and be loved. But we've kind of lost the art of it. We've pursued these kind of strange ideas of individualism and independence, and independence, we like to say, is not a gospel value, but interdependence is, the fact that, not codependence, that's different, but the fact that we're meant to do life together, we're meant to share stuff. Not everybody needs a washer and dryer and a lawnmower, and we can do meals and, have kind of life within a neighborhood. So we've been building that up, and this is our 20th year, man, in Philly. So it's for The Simple Way, and it's taken time. So I think we've also got to be patient as it's kind of like growing a little tree. You grow it small and you take good care of it, and as it gets more and more stable, it just kind of happens, naturally. So yeah, I definitely think that. I think what's also true is that you look in some of the wealthiest corners of the world, and we have some of the highest rates of loneliness and depression and suicide, and we end up being very economically stable, but very kind of communally impoverished, and so just like anything, I think we got to start exercising those muscles again and do it slowly. You don't just set off on a marathon, but there's ways to, I think, begin to create room for community, and some of it's just turning off our computer screens and phones and stuff, and being present with each other, and have it like we don't have many TVs around here, but we have a big screen on the wall. We painted a TV screen on the wall. We can show movies, but they're meant to be experienced communally, and we're just trying to build our life with that space. Maybe I can even show you, some of
Oh yeah, sure.
Out the window here, like we, are paint murals, and our little neighborhood is built, these little row houses, and so we all kind of live on the same block. But we just been building that slowly and steadily, and not every community looks the same. That's where I think we shouldn't get too infatuated with like one idea of what community, like the form or shape that it takes, but more the spirit of it, and find ways that we can pray together and eat together and share money together. And so I mean, everywhere I go, I stay with communities probably very similar to what you have, and I see new ones being born and old ones. Like last week I was down at Koinonia Farm. This is their 75th year.
Yeah.
And what they did down there, this is before the civil rights movement, in the middle of racial segregation. Black folks and white folks bought land together, and they started living together, and it was illegal, and their lives were constantly threatened. In fact, we heard some of the people that grew up there that are like almost 90 years old now, and they talked about how regular it was to have gunshots fired through their windows, and they were on the ground because people hated them, and they were kicked out of almost every church in the area, which is heartbreaking, but they were confident that what they were doing was right. And at one point, Clarence Jordan, one of the founders, met with Martin Luther King, and they say that may very well be what inspired Dr. King in his I Have a Dream speech. He actually has a line where he says, I have a dream that the sons of slaves, the children of slaves and the children of slave owners will live together in Georgia. And so that vision, I think what he used to say too is that our communities become demonstration plots for the kingdom. We demonstrate what God's love looks like, and that's what we're trying to do, I think, is live in the way that God intended for us to live. And as you look at our world, we've come a long way from that. So, yeah. Well, I'm coming over there. Did you know that?
Yes. You know what? I was the one inviting you.
Oh, thanks, man. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we had a meeting about this Free Zone Festival, and they were like, how are we going to get more young people interested in this thing? And I said, you have to invite Shane Claiborne again. So that's what we did. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing you then.
Maybe we'll see you at the Lynchburg Revival. Nah, it's too long. Huh?
That's too long for me, I'm afraid.
No, it's all good, man. Well, we're going to live stream it,
Oh, wonderful.
For us, and man, I look Pentecostal there. So send my love to everybody, man.
I will. Thank you so much for taking the time, Shane.
Yeah.
God bless you. Bye.
Tack för att du lyssnar på Jesusfolket. Den här podden drivs av Jerusalem-projektet som också står bakom bloggen Hela Pingsten. Och för att se hur du kan stödja och hjälpa oss utveckla podden vidare, gå in på jerusalemprojektet.org och läs mer. Gud välsigne er, ha det bra, hej då.